Hello again. I thought I'd put together another short video. This time I'm going to be looking at how to do a risk assessment. This is something that a lot of people struggle with, but it's a relatively simple process once you understand the basics behind it. Hopefully this will explain those basics. Carrying out risk assessments is one of the central tenets of health and safety law. If you look on the health and safety law poster under what employers must do for you, the first thing that they have is the following words: decide what could harm you in your job and the precautions to stop it. This is part of risk assessment. So what is risk assessment? Well, there are three elements. Firstly, identifying hazards. Secondly, working out the risk of being hurt by them. And thirdly, deciding how best to prevent that. So what is the difference between a risk and a hazard? So why have I got a picture of a crocodile here? It all goes back to one of my predecessors who used to tell the story of the crocodiles in the great grey greasy Limpopo River. And for years it used to make me wonder, why does he use that strange voice when talking about this river? It's all to do with a children's story about how the elephant got its long trunk and how the crocodile was involved in that. It's one of the Rudyard Kipling stories, the Just So stories. He used to tell the story because it nicely illustrates the difference between a hazard and a risk. So the hazard in the Limpopo River is the crocodiles. The risk is being a crocodile's dinner. If you swim in the Limpopo River, then there is a high risk that you will be eaten and never seen again. So when we're back in our offices here in Hertfordshire, has the hazard gone away? No, it hasn't. The crocodiles are still there and they will still eat you if you get close to them. But obviously in Hertfordshire, is there any risk of being a crocodile's dinner? I don't think so, because we're separated by hundreds of miles from those hazards. So one of the things we need to do is decide how big a risk is. We call this quantifying it. And the way we do it is this. We set up a scoring system. First thing we have to ask is, how significant is the hazard? How bad is it? We score this from 1 to 5. Then we ask the same question again of the chance of it happening and score that from 1 to 5. And in order to get a quantity that is meaningful, we take the two numbers that we've got, we multiply them together to get a risk score. So this table gives us some idea of the scoring system, and obviously our crocodiles are going to score a 5. This table gives us a scoring system for how likely it's going to happen, and if we swim in the Limpopo River, then it is very likely. So again, we get a score of 5. If we multiply the two scores together, we get a score of 25. And as you will see from this table, that puts it right up in the top right hand corner and indicates red, which is a very, very severe risk. So we have defined what we mean by risks and hazards. We've identified a way of quantifying risks, and now we come on to how we actually do our risk assessment. And any risk assessment, as outlined by the Health and Safety at Work Act and its associated documentation, will ask 3 questions. Who can get hurt and how? What currently prevents that, and is it good enough? And can we improve it? These are the 3 essential questions. Some of you will recognise this picture of my trusty guillotine from corporate induction. It was discovered in a cupboard under the stairs where it had been locked away because it was too dangerous. And so I brought it out, had a look at it, and discovered that there was a safe way of using it, hence the labels all over it. And this is from days before I was a health and safety advisor. 3 questions had to be asked. Who could get hurt and how? What currently prevents that, and is it good enough? And can we improve on it? So we apply our 3 questions. Who can get hurt and how? Well, I guess the answer is anyone who comes into contact with that blade. So ideally it needs to be left in the down position when not in use. Just running your fingers across that or catching your fingers on that will produce a nasty cut. The second thing is what currently prevents that, and is it good enough? If you look on the picture, you will notice that there is a guard running across the edge of the blade with a lip across it. If you put your hand on that, you can't get your fingers under the blade, and therefore it's relatively safe. The next question is, could anything be done to improve it? And the manufacturers of guillotines have had a go and have produced a couple of alternatives where your fingers can't come into contact with the blades. So without realising it, I had identified what we call a safe system of work. I'd worked out how to use the piece of kit without cutting my fingers off. Would other people know how to do that without proper training? Possibly not. And that's why it was labelled up in the way that it was, and it was then locked away in my cupboard rather than in the cupboard under the stairs. The other example I use in corporate induction is the fan that I found in one of our older buildings. We asked the question, who could get hurt and how? Well, anybody who get their fingers into the blades of that fan might get an injury to their fingers, particularly if they're children, as this is left on the floor. What currently prevents that, and is it good enough? Well, it has a guard, but as you can see, the guard has big gaps in it, and therefore you could get your fingers into that blade quite easily. Question 3, can we improve it? The answer is probably not, and therefore in this case the answer was to get rid of the fan and to replace it with something more appropriate. So now we have the basics of how to do a risk assessment. We can apply this to all sorts of situations we might find in our workplaces. We might want to do a risk assessment around inanimate load handling, moving cold chain boxes full of vaccines or paper or stuff like that. We may need to do assessments around patient handling and try and avoid unauthorised lifts such as this, the Australian lift, which has been outlawed for a while. We probably have to do security risk assessments, and lone worker risk assessments are important as well. We have COSH risk assessments where we have chemicals that could cause us harm. And we need to do risk assessments when we're using medical gases. Recently, of course, we've had to do risk assessments around COVID-19 and coronavirus and social distancing in our buildings. All of this is just typical of the sort of thing that we could use risk assessment for, and there are many, many other places where we could use it. A risk assessment without an action plan is about as useful as a chocolate teapot, of course. If we've done our action plan and we've put it into practice, then our practice should become a lot safer. But if we fail to do that, if we fail to take action, then we might as well not have done the risk assessment in the first place. So does our risk assessment need a special form? Strictly speaking, no. There are a variety of forms available, and one that we use in the Community Trust is this one here. It has a variety of steps and has been adapted to try and fit it to the 3 questions that have been asked earlier. Here's an example of a risk assessment that was produced back in April 2019 when there was an alert put out with regards to the use of fans in hospital areas, and obviously this has had to be pulled out and reused with COVID-19 on the wards. Here is a list of just a few other ones that I've thought of that have a health and safety angle to them. No doubt there will be other risk assessments used in other areas and in other departments. So I hope that has been useful in explaining the basics behind risk assessments and will make them seem a little less daunting in the future. Obviously, if you want me to check your risk assessment when you've done it and tidy it up for you, I'm well happy to do that. Please send them to me, email them to me using the email address shown here, or you can always give me a ring or contact me on WhatsApp and I'll talk through what you need to look at. I hope this has been useful. I look forward to hearing from you.